Here.
Mrs. Flores,
Here.
Mr. Lara,
Here.
Mrs. Cordero.
Here. Thank you. We will be going into closed session at the conclusion of our meeting this evening. The items that we will be discussing are conference with labor negotiators regarding CSEA. B, conference with labor negotiators with SMEA. And C, public employee performance evaluation for our superintendent. And I believe at this point, I am going to turn our meeting over to Mrs. Lathery from Bill Libby Elementary. Is that correct?
Yeah. Hi, yes. Good evening. Will we begin with the pledge right now, or?
Yes. Yes.
Okay. So we asked our TKs to recite the pledge and ask that they be part of our board meeting this evening. So I believe Brian will share his screen with our little TKs, and they'll lead us in the pledge this evening.
So at this point, we will all stand.
Hand on our heart.
Good morning, friends. We're going to begin the day by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, so I want everyone to quietly stand up. Quietly stand up. And then you put your right hand over your heart. And then we're going to look at the flag and we'll say the words together.
Okay, here we go.
Here we go.
I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Oh man, that's too good.
Thank you very much to your Bill Libby transitional kindergarten students.
Yes, they're a doll to watch every single day. So I'll go ahead and get started.
Please.
All right. So thank you, board members and Superintendent Ontiveros, for allowing our Libby family the opportunity to reveal our school colors and mascot this evening. It was a fun process working with our entire staff and students. And once we narrowed down our selections, we sent out a parent square to our families, and we asked them to work as a team and identify our school colors and our mascot. I know that we've not been able to have the traditional ceremony to capture the opening of our newest school, but we would love the opportunity to come back possibly in June and have a virtual celebration to capture our appreciation and thank everyone who contributed to bringing life to our beautiful campus. I've truly enjoyed watching this campus come to life from the ground up. We've had some good times, lots of memories. I'm so proud of our entire staff, and I appreciate their continued flexibility, their passion, and the joy that they bring to our campus every day. Now we just need our kiddos. So we're counting down the days to see our kiddos, but again, not the traditional way to reveal our colors and mascot, but we have two amazing 6th grade students, Alondra and Nudia, that will take us on a brief tour of our campus along with our big reveal. And you'll see some of our school colors throughout the video, and then our mascot will be identified. But before we begin, I would like to send a thank you to Alejandra Malgoza, our kindergarten teacher, along with her husband. They created the video, and then you'll see some beautiful pictures throughout the video who Robert Hansen Photography with AMG. They were able to capture our beautiful campus. So I want to make sure to acknowledge their efforts, and Robert Hansen. You'll see beautiful pictures throughout our video. So I hope you enjoy our tour, and you'll be able to see our mascot and our colors.
Thank you.
We are so excited to present to you our new school. There's no other elementary school like ours. We were named after a wonderful person who dedicated to positively influence children around our community through the Boys and Girls Club. When you step through the doors, you'll be greeted by welcoming steps. Here is our multi-purpose room, the house of our tinkering room, our cafeteria, and our performing stage. Here is our tinkering lab, where we'll be able to participate in robotics, STEM activities, coding, and others. This is the Learning Commons, where we will collaborate with other students across grade levels and work on our projects. Our stadium seatings allow for outdoor learning. Here is another area when we get to enjoy learning outside. This is our beautiful library with flexible seatings and beautiful view of the community. This is our indoor multi-purpose room with a stage in the back where we will be having performances. This is our kinder playground where they will get to play in the shade. This is our campus playground where students from 1st to 6th grade will enjoy some time in the sun during their break time. This is the aerial view of a beautiful site. Another aerial view of our amphitheater. I hope you enjoy the tour of the wonderful school. We are the Libby Huskies.
All right.
We are the Libby Huskies. Huskies.
Yay.
Wow, Libby Huskies, you are an inspiration to our Libby community and to the entire Santa Maria Bernardino School District family. Looking back and reflecting on how far we've come is simply remarkable. I am so proud of each and every one of you. As we prepare to bring you back on campus, we ask that you continue your enthusiasm and love for learning. We want you to know how much joy you bring to our lives every single day. We look forward to seeing your beautiful masked smiles on campus. And until then, please take care and stay safe.
Yay. Thank you
Huskies.
so much, Mrs. Lathery.
No, thank you. Thank you everyone for your support. We couldn't have done it without all of you. So, and thank you for all of your hard work and support right now as we get our students back on campus. So we couldn't do it without you. And we're ready to roll our sleeves up and bring our kids back. So thank you.
Okay, and the Libby Huskies.
We are,
And the school colors,
are like the Seattle Seahawks. We have like that lime green, that blue, and that gray.
Yeah,
Okay.
those were awesome.
We tried to incorporate the colors that we have here. So we started with about 7 different color schemes, and then we worked our way through narrowing it down. And then we had about 13 different mascots to choose from, and our families were the deciding factor.
okay. And what were the qualities of Huskies that made them the favorite?
What was the quality of the Huskies?
Correct.
As in?
As in,
Like the ranking as far as our Huskies, or where we stood?
the traits.
The mascot in terms of durable, strength,
They're
endurance,
intelligent.
intelligent. Yeah. Mhm.
They're strong and mighty.
Exactly.
We
Mhm.
had some other ones, and we looked at their qualities, their characteristics, and like, no, we don't want to relate with that. So, but we tried to look at all the characteristics, the qualities of the 13 that we narrowed down, and then we worked from that. But it was a large amount wanted to be Husky, so.
All right.
So.
And I'll just say, you've got a certain teacher over there who I know is a diehard Husky.
Yes. In the video, we actually had his Huskies in the video. So his Huskies were part of the video.
Outstanding.
Very awesome, Miss Lathery. Very awesome.
Thank you. And hopefully maybe in June, if you guys would allow us, we'd love to come back and do a virtual celebration and acknowledge everyone's hard work, and one of these days have a nice celebration on our campus. But until then, we'd love to come back in June and do some kind of virtual celebration, because you guys play a huge part in this as well. So.
All right. Well, we appreciate this very special presentation and are very much looking forward to seeing students on that campus and enjoying all of those fabulous amenities that are there. It's kind of like seeing a baby born when you watch it built right from the ground up and all of that stuff. So
Absolutely. And we've not gone through the process of this is all new to us. So we're going to learn and adjust from there if we need to. But all that matters to us right now is bringing our kiddos on campus, and we'll make the rest happen.
absolutely.
They'll bring the
Thank
magic
you.
to our campus. So.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who helped put that really nice video together. Both of them. They were really, really nice. So hopefully they're available on your school website.
Yes.
All right.
We're going to send everything through our Parent Square right now and reveal with our families too. So.
All right. Thank
Alrighty.
you so
Thank you,
much.
everyone.
Thank you.
All right.
Have
Thank
a great
you.
evening.
You too.
Thanks. You
Bye-bye.
too.
Bye.
Moving on to public comment. Public comments are intended for members of the public to address the Board of Education on items involving the school district. Such testimony shall be limited to 3 minutes each, or 15 minutes total per topic. If an answer to a specific question is requested, the board president will, if appropriate, direct administration to respond in writing. Do we have comments on agenda items?
No comments on agenda items.
Comments on non-agenda items?
Yes, we have 2 comments this evening. The
Okay.
first comment is submitted by a number of junior high school teachers. I will read the comment and then quickly go through the names so that folks are acknowledged for their submission. And the letter reads, "Dear School Board, we would like to inform you of some troubling concerns which have to do with curricular decisions being made without classroom teacher input. This troubling trend started 2 years ago when Math Super Bowl was canceled. Then the pandemic hit and Battle of the Books was canceled, though teachers were willing to continue through Zoom. Why were teacher-led after-school enrichment clubs that have been part of SMBSD history and culture canceled? These clubs were after school, voluntary, and provided enrichment in an atmosphere with like-minded, motivated children. And then this year, teachers were told to stick to pacing guides and only use district-adopted programs and a few specific supplemental materials. The problem with this is that materials teachers used in the past, such as Starfall, vocabulary, RAS Kids, were deleted from the list. These programs were excellent for addressing Tier 2 intervention because they help make learning engaging and provided meaningful scaffolding. Next, teachers were told not to read full novels with students. Imagine a school setting where teachers are told not to read novels. You may be thinking this sounds like a plot from a dystopian novel. The rationale for this questionable mandate is that district-adopted ELA programs include unengaging and disconnected excerpts from novels. However, students become frustrated because excerpts come to an abrupt end or not given adequate context to be fully understood. Students no longer experience the satisfaction of completing a book in its entirety, understanding the full plot, character development, motifs, and symbolism. By reading novels, students learn vocabulary, increase comprehension and fluency, and get excited about reading while learning valuable life lessons. The irony in this rigorous method of teaching language arts is that students miss out on nuances of a text and the actual rigor of having to analyze a text as a whole, structured piece of literature. These top-down decisions are happening in all subjects and grade levels. Why is input from classroom teachers on curricular decisions important? We know our students. We know what materials are most efficacious in filling gaps in district-adopted programs. Teachers work hard to motivate students, get them excited about learning, and believing they can be successful scholars. Much of this is accomplished by using materials that supplement, not supplant, district-adopted programs. The problem with teachers being automatons and only using the district-adopted curriculum is that students are left out and fall behind. The art of teaching is knowing how to address student needs, which sometimes requires creativity and supplemental materials. We want you to know that from classroom teachers' point of view, these top-down mandates will have unintended consequences, such as a loss of students' experiencing joy in the learning process, among many others. Respectfully submitted, Therese Brady, Darcy Swords, Rye Cooley, Kevin Foote, Terry Fields, Stephanie Douglas, Andrea Pengelli, Steve Gould, Carol Gillespie, Richard Guerrero, William Walker, Dina Clark, Scott Underwood, Marcia Frainer, Deborah Simpson, Kevin Smith, Aria Davis, Michael Sullivan, Omar Yunus, Gwen Pryor, Kimberly Johnson, Lisa Paniagua, Paloma Rosales, Kelly Hargett, Kim Cairns, Helen Grace Halpin, Michael Lacaille, James Dahman, Stacy Boom, Doris Amanda Jeffries, Caitlin Klein, Jessica Husselstein, Regina Goy, Jose Antonio Rodriguez, Sarah Hebert, Debbie Flores, Brenda Palacios, Tammy Payne, Joel Kringle, Mackenzie Garcia, Amy Adams, Mira Cameron, Robert Jimenez, Maria Cisneros, Deanna Jones, and Elizabeth Verdugo Martinez. The next comment is submitted by Desiree Felix. And it reads, Dear school board members and district personnel, one of the best administrators I have ever had, Stephanie Miller, used to ask us every week, how are you doing? Why was this sentiment so important? Because she made an effort to care and actually listened. She made it well known that we mattered. Her genuine concern for us mattered to improve school culture. It mattered to personal accountability and school accountability. I'm asking you, have you asked teachers this question in the last week or all year? I haven't been asked by any school board members or district personnel. I urge you to reach out to us and ask this question because what you'll hear is important and because we matter. Another amazing administrator I was lucky to have was Mark Muller. He consistently looked for and found all the positives I was doing and encouraged me with positive affirmations. He popped his head into my room weekly to smile, encourage, root for the students, and say, keep up the good work. Yes, weekly. Not to mention, when there was critique, he highlighted someone else that we could learn from to improve ourselves. Constructive criticism by spotlighting a colleague. All this made me work harder and better. I earned a Crystal Apple Award while I was working at that school. I'm so fortunate to be working at Adams School because our administration and teachers, staff are a special group of people. I am thankful for all the support at our school, but this alone is not enough to weather the drastic changes of our jobs in the last year and upcoming year. I am asking for improved communication to parents and staff from the district office. To be blunt, I am not seeing evidence from the district level of a genuine effort to create the positive environment we need to sustain and rise above the tough changes we're about to face. Positive work environments translate to increased performance, increased motivation, and overall a good mood. We need support more than ever. The notion of a 21st century elementary classroom is a fallacy. Students at home can have poor internet, the ability to walk away from their screen, the ability to mute the teacher, the ability to turn off their computers, loud home environments, etc. All of these are counterproductive to an effective 21st century classroom. Some parents believe that a student who is on their computer is engaged in learning, even though they may be watching videos or playing games on non-curricular websites. All of the power is in the child's hands when they are at home to make good or poor decisions about their education. There is no way around it. We cannot go home with them. We need to really rethink simulcasting as a solution for the future. Sure, handy technology will function, but will it be an effective or efficient means to educate young children? Sincerely, Desiree Felix. And those are the public comments.
All right, thank you. I would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second.
It has been moved by Mrs. Flores, seconded by Mr. Lara to approve the agenda as presented. All those in,
If I wanted to pull something from the consent agenda, can that still be done at a later time, or does that have to be done now?
There's no consent.
we don't have a consent agenda tonight,
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
but yes, now would be the time to do that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the primary purpose of our meeting tonight is, as a special board meeting, is to conduct a study session. And this is our initial foray into the equity work that is beginning at the very beginning in our district. And so we have 3 items that will be reviewed for us. And it actually doesn't say, well, wait, who is doing this, but I'm going to assume that it is Ms. Dutra in Instructional Services.
And actually, I'm going to kick it off first to kind of create the shell around all this because, first of all, for Mr. Valencia, this is really the first opportunity he's had to sit in a study session. And these are things since I've been here, this is my 5th year, we've tried to schedule these study sessions on a quarterly basis because so much of what happens in a board meeting, there's so many things going on. And to meet once a month and, and just kind of get fire hosed is not a way to really keep pace when there, especially now when there are so many things going on. So I wanted to spend some time building some context and really going back to a presentation that we did almost 2 years ago around this design of our instructional leadership team. That really is the introduction to the topics we're going to cover tonight. And it begins with this, and I've shared this many times. When I applied for the job here in Santa Maria Bonita, it was a sitting superintendent in a district where my kids had gone to school or we'd grown up or we'd lived for 30 years. And, I felt like there was a light at the end of the tunnel. And then when this job came up, what really intrigued me was this job description. And if you'll remember, those of you that were in the interview, that my first question is I think it was Mr. Lara asked me, why are you interested? And I said, it's really what's here. And these are just some of those professional skills and abilities that were on the flyer that interested me in the first place. And it's this notion of believing in and supporting 21st century teaching strategies through teacher training and support. I do believe that 21st century learning is possible. There is no fallacy there. It is a requirement for our kids. And here we are 21 years into the 21st century, and we're still talking about 21st century learning, right? So there really is some momentum that has been built to really get our kids where they need to get to. Demonstrates instructional leadership qualities, has a record of leading curricular initiatives through Common Core. You know, Common Core was adopted back in 2010. It's not anything new anymore, but it's still a big beast when we talk about shifting the outcomes for learning. Has experience with and promotes consistent district-wide programs for student achievement. What I read there was, and this is not uncommon, I've worked in 4 other districts. It's difficult to build consistency across a single grade level in a school, let alone across a school, let alone across an entire district. And so that led me to believe that that's really the core piece. And John likes to make fun of the term that I made up, systemness, right? And he used it in an email the other day just to poke fun at me. And so I appreciate it, Mr. Holland's Head.
Hey, anything I could do for you, Mr. Altares?
I appreciate it. Has a track record of providing consistent district-wide procedures for regular and special ed programs. Again, is an indicator. Big systems, it's difficult to build that coherence. But will promote improvements in integrated practices in special education programs, particularly in special education programs. You know, because we've got gaps in our students with special needs across the country. And when we share data tonight, we'll see we've got some real digging in that we've got to do with all of our students, but in particular our students with special needs. Has experienced the value and will promote professional development for all staff? Absolutely. You know, I'll share in a minute a slide about how critical that is to moving the system forward. But probably the most important thing and the biggest challenging one was this: will utilize the strengths and talents of site administrators and directors, resulting in a more effective and cohesive leadership team. And that's something that starts within an organization before it can get across an organization, before it can get depth through an organization. And it really lends itself to this model of managing complex change. And I've shared this many times. This is not new research. If you can see it's actually from a text from 1991, was presented at a special education conference. It's been used in many forms. And what it connotes is those elements that have to be in place to achieve success. And it's the combination of vision, skills, incentives, and that's not just money, that's creating purpose, the resources needed to support the innovation, then the action plan leads to success. And when any one of those is missing, it leads to another element that it does not approach success. When you're missing an action plan, it creates false starts. And I can say in 35 years, I've had plenty of false starts. You know, Mr. Holland's Head, again, a track coach, that's probably not funny to you. You know, false starts are not something that we accept, but I think of all the things that we've started over the years that we never really got the down to the brass tacks to be able to build the operational piece. And, you know, we throw things away before we've gotten into them. When resources are missing, it creates frustration, because when you've got the skill and you got the understanding and the desire, and there's, you know, that resource piece is there. And that's, you know, where I came from in the area of the high desert under LCFF, we were a low unduplicated count district. And so we didn't receive the resources that others around us did. And it created some frustration. We saw other districts that had higher unduplicated counts were able to bring in those extra resources. And so that creates some frustration. When the incentives are missing, when the lack of purpose, that lack of understanding around the why is missing, it creates resistance, because there's not a connection to the importance and the relativity of that work. When skills are missing, it creates anxiety. You know, and all of us take pride in being good at the things we do. I don't like to do things I'm not good at. I remember when I've got 2 boys, boys, they're 30 and 28. And I remember I skied a little bit as a younger man. And where we grew up, our kids had a ski program in school. They snowboarded. They didn't ski. And so they wanted me to come with them one time. And so I thought, well, if I can ski, I can snowboard. Big mistake. I rode the seat of my pants all the way down the hill. It took me two times up and down the hill to figure out how to stand up on the doggone thing. I did that one time. I had enough, right? Because that inability to understand the what has to be in place creates anxiety. And then when there's a vision missing, it just creates confusion. And that's really probably the biggest challenge in a large system, is creating that common focus. It doesn't need to be, it's got to be pointed in the same direction, right? That we're all turned in the same general direction towards what we're trying to achieve, and it's around student success. And so that vision of student success is the driver of all the work that we lay out to accomplish. And so I've shared this slide before as well. And this, what I'm going to share here is an observation. This is something that I knew coming into this position existed. And it was based on historical student achievement results, because systems generally generate the results that they're designed to deliver. And what this is it's a combination of in the last accountability system, the API, that was statewide accountability that went back to actually 1998, was really that first adoption of the 97 standards, and it was the accountability that grew, was the measurement by which districts were ranked. It was an API ranking. And so what you see at the top line there, that one that's highlighted in yellow, that's the statewide average for all students across California from 2006 to 2013, which was the last year the API was calculated. The target in that system was to get to 800. 800 was like nirvana. That was in my previous district. We got to 806, and it was like, oh, we've arrived, coast. You know what? And that's you cannot, because what represents every one of those lines on that graph are children's lives. It's the trajectory of their lives. The line highlighted in the bolded in green is the performance of Santa Maria Bonita School District over that same period of time. So if you look at the far left where it says 2006 growth, the statewide API ranking was about 720. Santa Maria Bonita was just slightly below 700. That close. And when you take it over to the last year of 2013, you'll see that gap widened. Those other lines are, and I extracted this data from annual reports that were provided to the board every October. Under that old accountability system, you had to report publicly performance. And the individual who did the reporting every year selected like districts, because there was a similar schools index that was part of that. And so the districts that are represented here in no particular order, because the lines cross, were Bellevue, which is in Sonoma County. It's a kind of an ag community. King City, which is just up the road. Lamont over in the valley. Arvin in the valley. Anaheim Elementary, which is a large elementary district very similar to ours. And Greenfield. And what you'll see is in that time, every one of those districts closed that gap and eventually crossed the performance of Santa Maria Bonita. And so that, again, that's just a measurement of over time, you know, how was performance trending? And it mirrored in the A through G rates through the high school system. And we've shared this as we work with the high school system to build coherence between our systems. We've got an A through G graduation rate, which really is the entry point from high school to college career, is significantly lower than the statewide average, and that gap has grown. Although I'm going to commend my brother Antonio Garcia, if he's listening, that the last couple of years the high school district has done a great job of increasing that, which means that kids are getting greater exposure to those A through G approved courses. And so it shows that, and because we're the biggest feeder into the high school system, when kids are provided with those opportunities, they can succeed. And so it's really about, when we talk about equity and access, are we given that opportunity for all of our kids to thrive? And so I shared this with principals after I'd been here about 6 months, because I knew if I'd done it 6 minutes in, my parking space would have probably been gone the next week. It took some time to really build some orientation to understand that this was a long haul work. Systems change work takes time. And that's been a hard thing to rationalize over the last year, because man, we just been getting bombarded with developments that have been outside of our control, and having to take on skills that we're developing on the fly, which, to that previous slide, creates a lot of anxiety. I mentioned at the last board meeting last year at this time, it was, we can't stay in school when we talked about putting in that reentry plan over the summer around the state guidelines. There was anxiety because that's a big shift, and we're talking about another big shift bringing our kids back. But when I see Colleen Lathery sharing that school, and when I saw pictures of our students in our moderate to severe special education classrooms at Taylor return last week, that's really what drives this work, right? And it's really got to be the focus. How can we really do the best work to ensure the trajectory of our kids changes for their lifetimes? Because the impact of a child's K-12 experience really only has value the day after they leave 12th grade, because then it's the die has been cast. And so I share this just as orientation around this work, that what we're sharing tonight is not something new. It's not a one-off. It is the iteration of the work we've really been trying with that leadership group. And so it takes a while to permeate a system. When you look at cultural change in research, 7 to 10 years to really shift outcomes. And in a system as large as ours, 7 to 10, we can do it in 7 to 10 years. They're going to be writing research, but it's really focusing on how do we change those outcomes through understanding that when we know better, we do better. And so what I want to share tonight, well, I'm going to turn it over to Melissa, because I think this is my last slide. Yeah, I put a little blank in there. So I'm going to stop screen sharing, I think, or Brian's going to stop my screen sharing for me, I think, because I think he did the magic on the backside. Oh, no, it's mine. And now I'm going to, Mrs. Cordero, I'll turn it over to you to introduce Ms. Dutra to kick things off.
I'm okay. You already introduced me.
Do you need introduction, Ms. Dutra?
I think we are good.
I think we are good as well. And we are anxiously awaiting.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent, for the lead in. And then, of course, good evening, board members and member of the public watching online. Excited to have you here tonight. We have, as our first board study session with this team, we're really excited to talk to you about DEI work, but really specifically equity, right? And that the equity, that all of the work that we're doing that has an equity lens on it, we want to continue to bring to you in these board study sessions. So before I get started, I do want to introduce our team, because although there's kind of pieces to it, at any point, any one of us might chime in when someone else is talking, because we really are a unit on this. So we have Lori Grock from Assessment and Accountability. We have Jennifer Loftus from Teaching and Learning, Rebecca Herrick from Plan Alignment. We have Tammy Castillo-Schiffer from our Family Engagement, and Brian Zimmerman from our People Support Services. And of course, lots of people who are not on screen that of course are supporting this work. So really, the superintendent started with this, and it's because this is where we always start. We always start with kids, and this is the outcome that we're trying to get to. And so in order for all of our students to attain this vision of student success, we must, as a system, address our educational inequities. So for the remainder, you can click. So for the remainder of our board sessions, or when we bring you work like this, it's always going to have this through line of equity, or the lens of equity, because that's our commitment to you. When we brought forward the board policy for DEI, our commitment was that everything would have an equity lens. And so although like the DEI work team is just getting started and doing work, it doesn't mean that every single piece of the system is not already looking at our work through that lens. So for tonight, we're going to talk a little bit about some academic data sources through an equity lens. I'll give you just a quick update on where we're at with the actual DEI work team. Jennifer will then talk a little bit about, you've heard some data, and now what are we going to do about that? So what's this learning mitigation and acceleration plan? And then we'll have Ms. Herrick then come in and talk about, so what are some of the investments that we're making to address those educational inequities? Or how are we closing the achievement gap, right? How are we making it equitable for all of our kids through investments? So with that, let's talk about some data. Lori?
Thank you. So when we look at data through an equity lens, we can better understand whether our individual students and our groups of students are reading well, are on track for success in college, or perhaps need increased support. When looked at collectively across the district, the indicators of low achievement should spur increased energy and focus to support the system and our students. So it's a pleasure tonight to show you some different points of data. We're going to be looking at our district benchmarks, which are provided through NWEA, and we'll be able to look at both growth and achievement and how our students are doing compared to national norms and compared to other special subgroups. We're also going to look at junior high data around the number of Fs given on a report card. So let's jump right into the first set of data. So when we look at junior high data from the first report card marking period for each of the last 3 years, counselors hypothesized that the COVID closure had greatly increased the number of Fs that students were receiving. And so we pulled the data to look at junior high students with 2 or more Fs for the past 3 years and with 3 or more Fs for the past 3 years. So this was a hypothesis made by junior high counselors, given what we know about engagement and achievement in our COVID-induced distance learning model. But it's important to note that the trend line has been increasing steadily for the last 3 years, from 2018-19 to now. And in the 19-20 year, the data was not impacted by COVID, as this is the first reporting card period in the fall of 2019, before COVID closures were even a concern. So as we looked at this data, the wondering from the counselors was then, are EL students disproportionately impacted by this trend? So we looked at that data. And what we found, what we can see is that ELs follow the same trend line as all students, but they do not exceed proportionately the percentage of students in the group receiving 2 Fs or 3 Fs over time. So while we might have believed that an educational inequity existed for junior high English learners around F grades, we can now determine with this data that the inequity does not exist. We also, of course, need to ask more questions about the root cause of the increase in the Fs for the whole system and consider both ways to mitigate this impact for current students and ways to more coherently align the system to eradicate this outcome for all future students. So we looked at this.
Just add?
Yes.
And when we looked at this data, and I think she's going to talk about it right now, it really begs for data tells us some information, but really it helps us to ask the right questions. And so as you were looking at that data that Lori had up, really questions to start popping in your mind, but why? That's really the purpose of data, is to try to figure that out.
You stole my line. Absolutely. That's okay. It's true. Data doesn't answer questions for us. It causes us to ask the important questions and to find what other pieces that you as a board would like to explore. And so I hope that as we continue this presentation, that's what this data is doing for you. So moving on to our district benchmark assessment winter data, I do want to take just a moment to thank the assessment and accountability team. Michelle Sullivan and Kim Trento have done phenomenal work this spring, collecting assessments, supporting assessments across the system. Kim's been working really hard to get the winter benchmark assessment family reports out to our families through Parent Square. And Michelle has had a big hand in the charts and graphs that you'll see tonight, as well as the executive summaries that we have prepared for you. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity to thank the team. So as Ms. Dutra said, we always want to ground our work in the vision for student success, our commitment, our bold stand, and our expectation that all students will move a minimum of a grade level each year through effective Tier 1 practices. So if our goal is to know what students are ready to learn and to maximize growth for every student, this is a reminder for you of why we use NWEA as our benchmark assessment. And this is learning that we did earlier in the year with the board. So this is very much just a reminder for you. But NWEA is an adaptive assessment. It provides all the way down to the teacher and individual student level. That's an important call out because tonight we'll be looking at very high level data, very large groups of students and large trend lines across student groups. And so it's important to remember that while the view we give you is very high level, we also on the backside are able to provide teachers with individualized information about each student and what they're ready to learn. The data is reliable with over 40 years of academic research. It's an efficient use of time that provides more data with fewer test questions. It's a source of timely data. The teachers already have these results. The families, as I said, are receiving these results. And so there's no lag time like there is with the data that Mr. Ontiveros referenced earlier that we would get 3 or 6 months after the fact. And it's a nationally normed assessment. But given all of that, I also want you to remember that NWEA is just a single data point among multiple measures. This is not the be all and end all. It should not translate to a report card grade immediately. It is one point of data among multiple measures that teachers use. It is a skills inventory, not a curriculum or a checklist. And it is a method to reveal potential blind spots, which is what we hope to do tonight. So recalling the learning we did earlier in the year about Rit scores, you'll remember that NWEA and our winter benchmark assessments give each student a Rit score. It's a number for each area tested. And the analogy that I drew for the board was it's like going to the pediatrician. When you take your child to the pediatrician, they can tell you your child's height and weight, and inches are always inches and pounds are always pound. It's a consistent scale across all grade levels. And that score, that scale, that weight represents the student's achievement level at any given moment, just that one day when they were on the scale. But it also helps us measure academic growth over time because it's a consistent, reliable assessment that we use 3 times a year. So we're excited tonight because we are able to present our first set of growth scores. In the fall, we did our baseline first time assessment, and now we have comparison data. I also want to remind you that since the NWEA national norms are based on a bell curve, we know that 68% of all students, of all of our students in any given grade, any given subject, any district, can reasonably be expected to fall within the range of the NWEA normative Rit and projected growth. So that's what we hope to see with our data tonight. So NWEA did do a study. There's a lot of concern around distance learning and around the COVID slide and a loss of learning and a loss of schooling. So NWEA did a 2020 study of the fall administration of the test, and I wanted to share their key findings with you. They analyzed over 4.4 million students in grades 3 through 8, and what they found was that there are continued gains in reading. Students are not backsliding in reading. However, there are unfinished learning in math. There is unfinished learning in math, and their data review raised equity concerns about missing data on students from underserved communities. So what they found nationwide was this: the pinkish red line on the left and the right is the fall 2019 achievement data, and the teal line is the fall 2020 data. And so what you can see is that there are definite differences between reading and math and definite areas for concern. So we are encouraged that reading performance is similar to fall of 2019, but the math is very disconcerting. And content experts at NWEA consider that the reading may be a result of families and teachers finding ways to integrate more reading during the pandemic. But that said, on average, the student achievement in math is observed to be 5 to 10 percentile points lower than fall of last year. And content experts in mathematics, Mr. Ted Coe, offered that because mathematics is a process that builds skill upon skill, it's more likely to see these types of swings when learning is interrupted. And he also noted that unlike reading, mathematics isn't as easy to apply to daily life for parents and caregivers. And so coupled with the disruption to schools from the spring, it may be the case that students are missing key building block skills from last year that would require supplemental programs. So as a nation, teachers did great with reading, but we do need to turn our focus to supplemental programs in math. And so that is a kind of a broad overview of the national scene. And now we're going to delve into our local assessments. So I wanted to start with where NWEA ended, which was they had identified a systematic pattern of missing data that could be impacting the results of their national survey. What they found across the nation was that approximately 1 in 4 students who tested within the NWEA national sample of schools in the fall of 2019 did not have test scores in the fall of 2020. So nationally, we are not capturing the students hit hardest by the ongoing disruptions to learning. But at SMBSD, our completion rate for winter testing was more than 97% in all 3 subject areas, which exceeded well exceeded our designated 95% completion target rate. All schools met the 95% completion in all areas, with the exception of 2 schools who exceeded 94% in reading, but didn't quite make it to 95%. So while we do want to continue to monitor enrollment issues, given these completion rates, we feel confident that our scores accurately represent the students enrolled in SMBSD at the time of testing. The equity gap exacerbated by COVID closures was not experienced at SMBSD, thanks to the really incredible efforts of classroom teachers and site testing coordinators. So a big thank you to the teachers who made this test administration a success. So beginning to look at data, our overall district achievement, median student achievement, is in the 25th percentile. This achievement is below average, and this achievement is down from the 30th percentile in the fall of 2020. Again, given a standard bell curve, 50% is the median target for any school, grade, or group, and we are far below that median target. When we project correlations to the spring 2021 state assessments for 3rd through 8th grade students, NWEA MAP results predict that 20.4% of students will meet or exceed proficiency standards on state summative ELA tests, meaning that they'll score a 3 or a 4. And 8.3% of SMBSD students will meet or exceed proficiency standards in math. So getting into the specifics of the areas of achievement that we have from our winter administration, this chart demonstrates the difference between the SMBSD Rit score and the NWEA normative Rit for winter administration in reading. Santa Maria Bonita students begin kindergarten 2 points above the national norm. They are definitely ready for kindergarten, 2 points above the national norm in kinder. However, by the end of their 8th grade year, they are 11 points from the norm. 2nd and 3rd grades are farthest from the normative range, below by 14 points. So you can see that a bright spot for us is our kinder readiness for reading, and areas of concern, 2nd and 3rd grade especially, followed by 4th grade, 1st grade, and 5th grade. So looking at reading achievement by special programs, and we broke this into 3 different slides, K2, 3, 5, and 6, 8, because it was just sort of a feast for the eyes and a little too much to put on one slide. So this is the reading average RIT in K2 for these special subgroups. So you can see that this is English learners in red. This is students in foster care in orange. This is students experiencing homelessness in yellow. This is students who are identified as migrant in pink. This is a gap left for our GATE students because we don't have students identified in GATE until 4th grade. This purple is our students with disabilities, any students with an IEP. And then the blue line is the SMBSD as a whole, and the green line is the NWEA national normative data. So you can clearly see that a bright spot for us is 1st grade special ed. They're above the district norm or the district average. And 2nd grade foster students also are above SMBSD averages. So those are some bright spots for us. It is important to remember that some of these subgroups are much larger than others, but these are, it's good to see the achievement of some of these groups. And then our concern on this slide is our migrants especially perform far below the SMBSD and national norms. So looking at the same data for 3rd through 5th grade, we can see that we again have all of our subgroups, and you can see 4th grade pops in with GATE because this is the first year that they are identified. Typically, we would have 3rd graders in GATE. However, the 3rd grade students currently would have been 2nd graders, and they didn't experience the GATE testing because of COVID closures. So we're a year behind on identifying that group. So you can see that our GATE students consistently in these grade levels outperform both the SMBSD average and the NWEA national norm. And you can see concerns in the areas of migrant and English learners. Moving on to reading for 6th through 8th grade, laid out the same way. I feel like I should just stop talking for a minute and let everybody sort of absorb. I know it's a lot. So I'm just going to take a pause. All right, so you can see that our areas of our bright spots are again foster youth, outperforming SMBSD averages in all 3 of these grade levels, doing very well. Those foster students are doing well, and our GATE students consistently outperforming both SMBSD and national averages. Our concern areas include special ed, English learners, and migrant, all struggling and falling below the district and national norms. So that's one cross-section of the reading data, looking at it by special populations. What we wanted to do next was to look at how our students do based on their home language.
Lori, just if you can stall there just for 1 second.
Sure.
Just a reminder, Lori's picking out, right, things, you know, clear things that show up when we look by special programs, but also just the overarching us as a system versus the national norm, because that's when we see that, we have to really focus on tier 1 instruction. And then when we see, I'm using my cursors if you can see it. And then when we see our special program students, then that's when we really look at, they have to have grade level and they need it because they're far behind, and they need some supplemental programs. So thank you, Lori.
Thank you. So as I said, the next way that we wanted to look at this same data, the reading average Rit scores across grade levels, was by students' home language. And we actually have many, many languages in our district, many. So we took the biggest 3. And you can see here the data, reading achievement by home language for English. So these gray bars are the English speakers. Mixteco is this peach color, those who speak Mixteco. Spanish is the gold color. And then again, all of SMBSD and the NWEA norm. I do want to point out that the size of these groups varies greatly. So as I said, we took the 3 largest groups. The English group is 3,081 students. The Mixteco group is 1,745 students. And the Spanish group is 10,426. So it's a very large range. Other languages in our district, including Zapoteco, Arabic, Filipino, Ilocano, Mixteco Bajo, and Morocco, account for about 459 of our NWEA scores, but no subgroup was larger than 125. And so we included those only in the SMBSD group only, but we are certainly able to provide that disaggregation level if that's something that the board is interested in or a board member is interested in. And so again, looking at our bright spots, that kinder readiness overall as a system exceeding the NWEA norms, but then even more stark is that the English speakers are far above the other 2 subgroups that we looked at and far above the Santa Maria Bonita and the national norms. And the area of concern, the consistently lowest performing group is Mixteco speakers. So obviously we would want to talk about what sort of excuse me, supplemental programs or supports might be necessary for that group, as well as tier 1 for everyone. The next way that we wanted to look at the data, because we just haven't had enough yet, was we wanted to talk about gender. So is there a gender gap in our district, boys versus girls? So this chart demonstrates the difference between SMBSD Rit and NWEA normative Rit in reading based on the student gender. As you can see, there is very little statistically significant difference between girls and boys in reading Rit. Females have a very slight achievement advantage if you look at this data by quintiles. So 21.4% of females score in the highest 2 quintiles of achievement, labeled as high and high average. That was 21.4% versus males in those 2 quintiles at 17.6. So if you slice the data that way, there's a very slight advantage to females. And you know I was going to go find that. So the Rit and achievement data presented tells us how our students are performing against others in the nation. And as we've discussed many times, we like NWEA as our district benchmark because it provides not only achievement data, but also growth data. And we want to know if our students are growing and if they are growing and learning at appropriate rates. So now let's look at the growth data for reading. So the diamonds on this chart, the golden diamonds, represent the expected growth for all students across the nation. Notice that there's no data for transitional kinder or kindergarten in this chart. This test is not administered to transitional kindergarten. And in kindergarten, we did not administer the NWEA reading in the fall, so there was no data for growth for that grade. So this chart demonstrates the difference between the SMBSD Rit and the NWEA normative Rit expected growth. SMBSD observed growth averages by grade ranging from a low of 2 points of growth in first grade to a high of 5 points of growth in third grade. And notice also, to great applause, 6th, 7th, and 8th grades all met or exceeded their expected growth norms. So again, remember that these diamonds represent typical growth across all students. This is how much the typical students grew. And on a typical bell curve of distribution, it is reasonable to expect 68% of students to meet their growth targets calculated by NWEA, 68%. In SMBSD, looking at each individual student, 13,464 students had a projected growth expectation, which means they took the test in the fall and took the test again in the winter. And of those, 5,587, or 41.4%, met their growth projections, which is far below the 68% we hoped to see. So going back to the point that Ms. Dutra made earlier, this sort of data and that 41% versus a 68% expectation indicates to us that we need to make some investments at the tier 1 level for all students, in addition to looking at the cross-hatching of groups and subgroups. So that is reading, and I'm going to go on to math now. And we're going to look at the data in the exact same way for math. Oh, I forgot to call out our bright spots. So our bright spots are 6 through 8. So this is our math average RIT scores by grade. Again, this chart demonstrates the difference between SMBSD RIT and NWEA normative RIT on the winter test administration. SMBSD students begin kindergarten 3 points above the national norm, completely ready. But by the end of 8th grade, they are 12 points below the norm. 5th grade is the furthest from the normative range, fully below by 15 points. But as you can see, all grades from 1st through 8th are areas of concern where the gap widens from our achievement versus the national achievement. So again, the bright spot, kinder, beating the national norm. All the other grades are a concern. This is the math achievement by special programs. So again, red is English language learners, orange is students in foster care, yellow is students experiencing homelessness, pink is students in the migrant program, purple, students with disabilities, blue, the SMBSD average, and green, the NWEA average. You can see that we have a bright spot in 1st grade special ed, meeting the district average. And in 2nd grade, our students in foster care exceeded the SMBSD average. Areas of concern: kindergarten special ed is the lowest performing group in this set of subgroups, and our migrant students in pink are consistently below the other groups. K2, here's 3 through 5. So in 3rd through 5th grade on math, we see GATE as a bright spot where they are exceeding national norms. And we see some concern, some struggling in the special ed subgroup as well. 6th through 8th grade. So again, really strong performance by our students in foster care in both 6th and 8th grade. They exceed the SMBSD overall average, and our GATE students consistently outperform both the SMBSD and national norms. And concern in the special ed department, especially that subgroup of students appears to need more support. Here it all is by home language. So again, English in gray, Mixteco in peach, Spanish in yellow, all of Santa Maria Bonita in orange, and the NWEA norm in green. So a call out again, our English speaking students outperform the other subgroup, the other home languages that we looked at, but also excuse me, 6th and 8th grade. Sorry, I'm on. Yeah, I am. Excuse me. Sorry. So looking at math averages by gender, again, females versus males, there is no statistical difference in performance between boys and girls' Rit scores, no statistically significant difference. In this area, males do have a slight achievement advantage, with 16.3% of males scoring in the highest 2 quintiles versus 14.6% of females. So I really wanted it to be a clean sweep for the females, but I have to give credit to the males, a slightly higher quintile performance. So again, this is a picture of our district as a whole in math achievement, and now we look to growth. SMBSD observed growth averages by grade ranged from a low of 2 points in 1st and 2nd grades to a high of 5 points in 6th grade. Grades 6 and 8 met or exceeded the expected growth norms. Again, the golden diamonds are the national expectation for growth, and the lavender bars are the actual growth observed in Santa Maria Bonita. Notice that in this chart, it's a little different than reading because we do have a growth computation for kindergarten. In the fall, we piloted the NWEA test in math in kindergarten with a very small group of students. It was a statistically relevant group. It was more than 10, but I believe the total number of students tested was 12. So this growth calculation that you're seeing is for those 12 students. So that can be taken with a grain of salt, but I did want to call out that's why there's kinder data here that was not here for reading. We only practiced the test in math with a few kindergarten students. So in Santa Maria Bonita, there were 13,464 students who had a projected growth expectation, again, meaning they had a fall score with us and now a winter score with us. And of those, so recall 68% on the bell curve could reasonably be expected to meet the growth. Of those students, 41.4% met their individual growth targets, so far less than the 68% we would have hoped to see. We're going to move on now to science, and just as a reminder, science we only administer at this time to 7th and 8th graders in our district, although it is available and we may use it in lower grades at some point. But right now, our data set is for 7th and 8th grade students. This chart demonstrates the difference between SMBSD Rit and NWEA normative Rit for the winter test administration in science. SMBSD students did not perform as well as the national average. 7th grade, 9 points behind, and 8th grade, 8 points behind. So less of a gap than we saw in some grades for reading and math, but still a significant lag. Here is our science achievement by special programs, same special programs we've looked at for other subjects. So English learners, students in foster care, students experiencing homelessness, migrant, GATE, special ed. So a call out again to our students in foster care who are exceeding the SMBSD average, and our GATE students who are exceeding the NWEA average. And concerns about our special ed subgroup especially. Here it is by home languages, again, English, Mixteco, Spanish, all students in SMBSD and NWEA norms. So we can see, as with the other two subjects, the students who speak English as a home language have a slight advantage over their peers, but are still well below the national norms. So while they appear to be doing better than some of the other subgroups, they really, when you look at them compared to the national norm, they're not where we want them to be. Again, indicating we need to look at tier 1 instruction for all students. And of course, and again, our mixed TECO speakers seem to be slightly below the other subgroups that we looked at for home language. Boys and girls. So what's really interesting in this one is that there does seem to be a bit of a difference between girls and boys. Girls are outperforming boys on their average RIT. However, when we look at students in the highest 2 quintiles, it is a statistical dead heat. Both boys and girls have 18.8% of their students in the top 2 quintiles. So again, I wanted a tiebreaker for the females, but I couldn't quite get there. The data would not tell the story that I wanted it to tell, unfortunately. And then looking at science growth, by grade level, again, you can see students in 7th and 8th grade grew by 1 point, but did not meet the national expectation for growth of 3 points and slightly below 3 points in the 8th grade. Whew. So that was a lot of data. I'm going to pause there and see if there are any questions or comments or further exploration that the board would like to discuss.
Lori?
Yes.
Oh, good. I'm unmuted. So there seem to be a couple of different things that I had some questions about, and one was the change or shift in language scores, and then the growth, because certainly there was a fall off in math for the ELs in 6th through 8th. But I was curious that the Spanish speakers in the lower grades were didn't seem to be as much the case, if at all. And I'm wondering, did we separate out our DLI kids from the other campuses? Because one of the things with trends is it's a trend because it doesn't have all the variables. There are variables that are unaccounted for, and one of the things that we're doing on one of our campuses is different. So I was wondering if we looked at that as a separate entity.
We did not for the purposes of this presentation, and the way that we pulled the data was by discipline. So there were, if you recall from the slide that had the number of students who took tests, there were 60 students who, for example, in kindergarten, who took the Spanish reading test and the Spanish math test, but right. We calculated that as a discipline for math and did not disaggregate into the Spanish test versus the English test. We can certainly provide that data to you if you're interested in it. The executive summary that I have for you that I've linked in the slide deck as well also breaks down at a school level, so you would be able to look at Jimenez, but we can definitely look at the DLI data as a separate subgroup if that's something that you're interested in.
Lori, we can share that in the board memo.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be great. I mean, it's just, again, it's when we're talking about trends, we want to see what influence trends, because there's all these different variables, even though we're trying to disaggregate the groups.
Yes, and, absolutely.
There are different campuses or different other mitigating factors. And I was wondering also why we still have GATE. Or if we do still have GATE, are there how are those kids selected out? And are there kids who are, say, not GATE designated in those classes? Because one of the things that Mr. Ontiveros and I have talked about in the past is kind of as a something that's emblematic of either having high expectations or even something that maybe addresses some of the stuff that the junior high English teachers were talking about. When you have higher level or challenging content or what have you, and other classmates that are doing that in there, then that can tend to bring folks up. So I'm wondering about that.
So I can speak to the first half of your question, which is the identification of students, and then I'm going to toss it to Jennifer Loftus to talk about the programs for GATE identified students. So our students in Santa Maria Bonita, in a typical year, we use the COGAT screener, which is a nationally recognized screening for GATE identification, and then we have a very robust system in place for teacher recommendation and identification outside of the COGAT. So we all know that there are students who are GATE or who appear to be gifted and talented in subsets that aren't easily tested through the COGAT. So we have a musical genius and they're gifted and talented, but they might not score well on the COGAT screener. So we do have a robust system in place to identify students for GATE. Unfortunately, because of the COVID closure, we weren't able to do that testing last year, but in a typical year, we would test all second graders and then any other students, 3rd through 8th grade, who have been recommended for GATE testing by a teacher. And so that's the identification piece. And then I'll ask Jennifer Loftus to, or maybe Ms. Dutra, to address the second part of the question, which is where are those students in classes and programs?
Sure. Thank you, Lori. One of the things I would point out is that when we're looking at the data, the GATE data is just, it's the GATE data as a whole. So when we look at all of our students who are eligible for GATE services, we've then pulled their data to show how they're performing on the NWEA. With regard to the classroom makeup or the standalone programs that you were referencing, those don't exist any longer. The students are, we believe those strategies are good for all kids, right? And pulling those particular students who have been found to be eligible for GATE services all into a class by themselves is not a best practice. It is not grounded in research, and it's something that we have moved away from.
Perfect. Thanks, Jennifer. That was kind of exactly what I was getting at. And I was curious too, how many of our EL kids or other subgroups are in that GATE group at some point. If you could let me know about that too.
That's good data that we can put together for you. I also someone mentioned about that in a normal year, we would screen all of our second graders just because this board session is about equity. That is
exactly.
When you look at a district that's trying to do things like equity audits to see, are you ensuring that kids are not being systematically left out of something? That GATE screener,
exactly.
Yep, that GATE screener is one of the things that they will automatically tell you must have in place to make sure that we're not missing any of our kids. So I love that we do that at second grade. And that's a standard grade level. Some districts also do 4th, but typically since GATE doesn't really extend past 6th grade, it sometimes doesn't make sense to do 4th as well. So the main grade level across the state is second grade for those assessments.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question regarding the GATE strategies. And I know for a period of time, teachers at school sites, at least one per grade level, 4, 5, and 6, maybe 3, but I'm not sure, received that training. Are we now training every teacher in those strategies?
We are moving toward that, Linda, certainly, because we do, like I said, believe that those strategies are good for all kids. I would say that with regard to the current training, we continue to offer that training to our teachers, and those teachers who have previously had that GATE certification, if you will, continue for the most part to have that. And additional teachers are added in every year.
Okay, because I would say that probably enhances the tier 1 level of teaching.
Yes, 100%. Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Mr. Valencia.
What supports are available to our students that are struggling? So, for example, some of our EL students, some of our special education students, our Mixteco speaking students. I know that certain communities were disaggregated. So what supports do we have available, or what additional supports do you all recommend based on research, based on best practices to help?
Thank you for that question, because it's actually a perfect lead in to where I'll be going. As soon as Lori's presentation is over, I will be talking about how we're going to address the learning loss, how we're going to mitigate the learning gaps that Lori was speaking to as she presented our current data.
And really to list out everything that we're doing across the system and programs would take us, we'd have to put that all together. There are so many things that we do. Ms. Herrick will also be talking about investments and how we're supporting that. I mean, it's why we do these board workshops, because this work is all connected. And that's why we're trying to create that through line for you. You heard the data, and now it's like, what are we doing about it? So that's really what Rebecca and Jennifer are going to be talking about. I'm going to just butt in quickly and just give you a quick update on our DEI work team data, and then we'll get to our next two friends. But I am quick tonight. You never hear me say that. So I'm just like 3 slides. Super excited to share with you. We had our first meeting on Monday. And, I wrote 48 members, but since a day ago when I made this, we have 2 more members. So we're at 50 now, because now people email and go, I want to bring a friend. They want to be on it. And so we keep growing and growing, but 48 members. We have certificated staff. We have leaders from the site and a few from SUSE. Our first meeting was really around agreements and roles of the group. In this kind of work, it's not your average norms that you have. You have to have some real agreements about how do we have conversations that are going to be uncomfortable? Like, how do I say what I want to say if I'm from the dominant culture? How do I have a voice and not feel like I might offend, right? And so there's a lot of agreements that we talked about, but we've just scratched the surface. I do not want to overplay how much we've done. The team did some work on what they believe the role of this group should be, and we'll circle back to that. Community building is in bold because it's a huge part of this work. Again, since it is work that can be very personal, very sensitive, it's emotional. People have emotions about this work, feel strongly, passionately. We have to be a really strong team that gets to know each other, hears each other's stories, right? So that we can really learn together. We started just a little bit, watched a video. They've got some, I call it pre-work. In some worlds, you might call it homework, but just sounds happier with pre-work for the next meeting. Around talking about race, they're going to be taking an assessment that I've taken it a number of times, just around biases that we might have. This first one is about, it's called a race equity survey. And then we're doing a book study, and we're just starting it. They're just reading the intro in chapter 1. I have provided that book. If you're in person at the board, you should have received your book from Kristen, I believe. And if you're not in person, then we'll get the book to you. And what I'm thinking I would do is in the board memos, I'll ask some thoughtful questions, the same ones that I'll be asking with the DEI group, so you can follow along and be a part of that book study for this first book. There will be plenty of other books. I have a small group that I'm working with of teachers that just, I showed them the presentation, and mostly what they said was less is more. So they really were a big help. And I told them it was like 2 a.m. and I could just hear this one guy's voice going, less is more. And I just slowed it down. So that team is really helpful already. I've sent them each different books that they're looking through just to give me their opinions and to talk together on some other focus work we might move forward with. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive. It was just a great group of people. People are positive, excited to get the work started. They filled out a survey where we asked how often we'd meet, those kind of things. So we'll be meeting monthly. And then we have one classified staff member on this team, but we do need to recruit just at least a few more because we really want this to be, from at the system level, how we're doing this work. And we have certificated and we have management, but just one classified member isn't quite enough voice for us. So we do have that recommendation. These are the objectives for, and I say spring of 2021, because there are certainly going to be many more objectives, but really it's just about connecting as colleagues, right? Telling our stories, our identities, what this work means, and ensuring that we've got that diverse community of learners. We need to establish common norms and language and expectations, things that I talked about when we first talked about DEI. And then again, we've got to start those dialogues, right? And thought-provoking experiences to push our collective thinking. We're going to be looking at data. The first slide that Lori put up with all the different data pieces, and she just showed you a couple. Those are the type of data pieces that she'll be bringing back to the board, but that we'll also really be digging into with this team, right? Like, what does this data mean to us? And like, how do we start unpacking that? And a little bit, Mr. Valencia, to what you said is, do we have all the right supports in place for our students of color, for our students that are misstep, for students who are LGBTQ, for kids who are just not connected to school, all those things. So that's just the first couple months, and I'm sure this will roll into the spring. So the timeline, and I was clear with them, and I want to be clear with you as well, is that the timeline is a long journey ahead, right? And that this is what it'll look like. First, we raise awareness. That's within ourselves. That's when I have to figure out my own personal bias. I have to see where the bias is in around me, and what do I hear that I don't even realize is a microaggression, or right? Like, it's really about personal awareness as this team. Then we gain knowledge. And what that means is we're going to read and study and hear stories from oppressed populations, because we might have a personal study around one particular group, but maybe not about others. And we need to hear those stories. That's a big part of it. And then it's building this group's capacity around, how do we look at this work differently? What does this look like in our district? What are the recommendations that we have for developing skills? That's that next one, for a system. So do we need to really understand what cultural responsive teaching looks like? Do we need to understand how to interrupt and disrupt microaggressions? Do we need to have gender spectrum training, because we have a real need there? The data will guide us on that, right? Because everyone has their own passion where they want to enter, but we're going to let the data story help us with those first priorities. And then we really specifically act, like, what are things we've got to put in place? The main thing that needs to be put in place is a board policy. So I, just so appreciate the board, and that we started with that. Like, that's our grounding document and telling us what else we need to do. In the presentation tonight, there were pieces that, as members who were listening, you probably noticed we need to already dig into some grading practices, because there was something amiss there. We need to look at why inequities, right, across with some of our subgroups, all those things. So the journey ahead is long, and it's not going to be immediate, because we want these to be systemic changes that last, not just we're going to do culture responsive teaching, and then in 3 years we're moving on to the next thing. We always want to be a district that keeps equity at the forefront. And a main thing that we talked about that's critical to say, this is forever work. We will never be done. I think I said at the end of a year and a half, we're not going to have a handbook, right? Like, here's the equity handbook. Let's follow this. That's not what the work's about. It's ever changing. I mean, just the climate, the social climate will forever be changing, and how that impacts our schools and our educational system and our students in it and staff. This all applies to everyone. So the next steps really are, I said, in the spring, just 2 more meetings, building community. We're going to start digging into data and start setting some priorities for next year. And then next year we'll continue this work. And then I just put the little thing here because this is really, this triangle of work is really, we're going to start at the bottom and make our way up. We'll also establish a stakeholder group. That's where board members would be a part of, community members, parents, so that we can hear the stories. And so we can hear from the community what their thoughts and feelings are to help us with, after we've looked at the data, we've gained knowledge, we've built capacity, that we've heard stories now and gotten input from our stakeholder group. Now, what are the recommendations that we need to make for specific actions? But along the way, it's not that we're not doing work around equity as we're showing you. There's a ton of work moving, but these are really specific actions for this body of work. And then I don't want to get ahead of the team, is that what I just wrote on this slide, because I wrote it and presented it to you, does not make it so. I now have a group of 50 people that will be helping to determine what our priorities and our next steps are. So I'm just going to say that this is a draft at this point. Okay. Questions on this piece with our DEI work, just at the tipping point. I think about our key driver, number 1, having the right people and the right work. And Luke always says we've got it backwards, right? Like, we have to have the right work and then match the right people to it. That's really what's happened here, is we've all identified the right work. We know this is the right work. And now I can really look at you with confidence and say, we have the right people. Just a great team of people that I am super excited to work with. I will say that I think that I'll be bringing in a facilitator. From just a selfish point of view, I didn't get to really interact with the group as much as I wanted to, because when you're facilitating, you don't get to. So we'll probably bring in someone who does that work probably next year, so that I can also be a learner and a participant, because no one's an expert in the work. No one is. Yes, Mr. Valencia.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my follow-up questions. Is it seems like right now we're doing this work internally, which I think is wonderful to have that that ownership of the work. But I also do wonder the value of also bringing in folks that have been through this process, because it is a challenging process.
It is, and I can't take all the credit. So I am partnering with TNTP. They are national experts on standards and instruction, but also equity. So much of their work is around equity, which is what drew us to them to begin with, because that's really a foundation of their work. So they are helping support this work. It's why I had so many things to do, because they're really supporting it behind the scenes. They can also support to facilitate. And so I think that we'll probably take them up on that. But also, we're not walking away from, like, we watched 2 videos. They're watching a video for pre-work. We'll have speakers come in, because it's so easy with Zoom to really have all these different perspectives. And we hear from different cultures, and we hear from different populations that have just been historically marginalized. We want to make sure that it's diverse and rich with a variety of people up front. Thank you for that comment. It's very helpful.
Yeah.
Like, what did you think would happen?
No, go ahead, Ricardo.
I was just going to mention, yeah, because I think that there's a lot of value in. Sometimes it's tough to see our own blind spots.
Strange.
Nice that we're working with this TNTP organization.
Yeah,
that can help us, right? To I really appreciate the position of, let's identify our gaps, right? Let's be honest with those. All of us have prejudices.
Yep.
So how do we begin with that? And then how do we then seek support to be able to address those issues. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Absolutely.
Is like.
And Ricardo, I was wondering if you or Mr. Ontiveros remembered who the school district was that presented the diversity at Taylor School. What that Pete Flores set up. There was a diversity and equity presentation, and I want to say it was Vista Verde or something.
I believe it was El Rancho High School.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Was it?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah.
There are folks that are doing work around. They were one of the first district school boards to adopt a ethnic studies resolution.
Oakland Unified has some really great work. Sac City's done some really great work. San Francisco Unified, some great work. So I'm pretty familiar with some of the statewide and then national. I was on that national task force. So there's great work everywhere. What I want to make sure our folks do is like, what's our context and what are our needs? Because where a district enters in this work is based on their local context. And so we want to make sure we're really hearing from everyone in our community and within our context, and then we'll start matching with who are the best people to partner with for our entry points for our district. Thank you for those suggestions.
The only reason I made mention of that, Melissa, was because really their emphasis, at least from a curricular standpoint, was on diversity and inclusion across the curriculum for the kids. It wasn't about one specific class. It wasn't about one ethnic vantage point or point of view. It was really about diversity. It was the diversity aspect of it. And so I think, that's something I think we can't lose sight of.
Yeah, and I'm happy to look into that. Whatever you guys suggest, I always write down and look into. Who I am. So the next section that we have is what Jennifer had started talking about, Ms. Loftus, is so we know we've got some equity gaps and some spots that we really need to work on. And so what are we going to do about that? So she's going to talk a little bit about that. Thank you, Jennifer.
Thank you, Melissa. I have to apologize because I do think that I tried to jump right in front of you. So my apologies. This evening, I would like to share where we are in developing our learning, mitigation, and acceleration plan. Our plan, while still in development, will include both an expansion and an enhancement of current learning supports, both during this upcoming summer and also during the school year, the next school year. We know that closing brick and mortar schools has had a disproportionately negative impact on students of color and students of poverty. The educational inequities resulting in that disproportionate impact have further widened the learning gaps many of our students already have. This plan, our learning mitigation and acceleration plan, begins to address our work in mitigating our students' potential learning loss while also accelerating the learning of our students. We are not waiting. We cannot continue to let our students continue to fall further behind.
Jennifer, do you know your screen's off?
I think we lost Jennifer completely. I don't see her on my screen.
I don't either.
No, we did lose her.
I'm sure she's not stressed at all right now and not feeling
Good
at
old
all
technology.
any pressure.
Bless her heart.
This happened to me in my classroom where I accidentally clicked the leave button and everybody's forced out. And so fortunately my students stay logged in and like a minute later I'm able to see them again. So
I can pick up until she gets here. I'm sure she's going to pop right back in, but I can pick up on hers.
Does someone happen also have her info to let her know in case she is not aware?
Here she is.
Oh, there you go. She is.
Jennifer, the board is highly disappointed. You're fine. I was about to jump in. You didn't want that.
Thank you for getting ready to save me there. Let me begin by sharing my screen here just again. One moment, please.
I just thought you gave a really long time for everyone to read that quote.
I certainly did, didn't I? Okay, so you should see a screen with a quote here on the left, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so what we know is that unfinished learning is not new. We've always had students who have experienced unfinished learning. This predicament typically results in the belief that the student cannot do grade level work. Because of that belief, we often go down the path of solely focusing on remediation through pull-out services, like an intervention. What we know now is that doing this actually further isolates our students from being able to even be in the presence of grade level instruction. As you can imagine, the cumulative impact leads really to an intractable opportunity gap, which is simply just not acceptable. As Student Achievement Partners shares, it is entirely possible to hold high expectations for all students while addressing unfinished learning in the context of grade level work. The shift needed to adjust how we approach our work in supporting a student with a learning gap is really where we must begin. Knowing that our next steps should not be pulling students out of grade level instruction or out of that good tier 1 instruction, and knowing that we simply cannot pause to reteach the last year's worth of instruction just in case we might have unfinished learning, means we really need to figure out how we will address the impact of the lost learning that has resulted from fewer instructional minutes and less face-to-face minutes with our students. So when we think about learning mitigation and acceleration, our thoughts go immediately to all of the elements that are represented on this image: assessment, curriculum design, expanded learning, which happens during the regular school year and does include extra supports for both our English and our migrant learners, summer school, and our specialized services for our students with special needs. Digging in, our goal for the upcoming summer is to provide as many learning opportunities as possible. When considering the design of our summer offerings, we have 3 layers of work that will guide our preparation. What is the data that we're going to use to identify students of need? How will we address their needs? And how can we get the students who need the most support, both enrolled and engaged in summer learning? Starting with identifying needs, our work begins by considering which students most need summer learning opportunities and what those opportunities actually need to look like. So we will begin with the data that we have readily available. This includes achievement data from our district assessment, the state assessment, our LPAC outcomes, school level data, which might, for example, be the school's CFA data or their common formative assessment data. We will also want to attend to our students' social emotional needs, which we know more than ever needs to be a focus of our work. And of course, as like other years, special programs for identified students will continue to occur. The data I referenced, or that I just referenced using, some of which Lori has already shared with you earlier this evening, tells a story about our system and a story about each student and his or her needs. It is this information that we are going to use to help us in our design of the core curriculum used for summer learning. Our intent is to include academic instruction, SEL support, and also enrichment opportunities. Our goal is about closing gaps, supporting students where they are, and overall re-engagement in school. As we start thinking about what this summer learning will look like, we are really excited that the return of students to our campuses means that we're going to be able to provide some in-person learning. In fact, our goal is to provide as many in-person offerings as feasible. However, we also don't want to walk past offering a combination of online or online hybrid learning models for those students who are interested. This slide lists just some of the programs under consideration, and more details will be worked out over the next month. We're really excited to share that we will work in partnership with our ACES team, as they will be joining us to enhance our summer school offerings. This team has had considerable training in the area of social emotional learning. So having them join us and supporting our students' social emotional needs over the summer is a win-win for everyone. As we move through the next couple of months, we are going to be soliciting interest in both attending and in teaching a summer program. We'd look to return to you no later than May with a brochure of all of our summer opportunities offered by the district to our students so that we can begin this recruitment process. As I'm sure you can already guess, this work does not end at the conclusion of summer. As we move into the next school year, our emphasis on mitigating learning loss and accelerating learning is, of course, going to continue. As I shared at the very beginning, unfinished learning is not a new problem, but it is an area that we do often struggle with addressing appropriately. And we do know that school closure has had a disproportionately negative impact on our students. So it will be critical that we stick to grade level instruction, that we focus on the depth of our instruction, that we prioritize content and learning, that we maintain the inclusion of all learners, that we identify and address learning gaps, and that we focus on commonalities that students share as a result of having lost that in-person learning over the course of the last year. Just like this year, my team will continue to use the resources put out by national educational leaders, like, for example, Achieve the Core, along with guidance from our core curriculum publishers and input from teachers across our system in order to create teacher guidance and develop resources. These resources include professional learning that will really be focused on addressing all aspects of unfinished learning. So the next steps in the development of the learning mitigation plan continue to be refining it as we gather more feedback from our parents, from our sites, and as we continue to analyze how our students are responding to our supports. And we will continue to learn, of course, from those nationally recognized leaders in education who are focused on providing guidance and supporting learning mitigation and acceleration. So we're excited about the work that we've started and definitely happy to continue digging into it throughout this summer and into next year. What questions might you have that I could answer?
I have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Valencia.
And thank you. Thank you for that excellent wait time, by the way, because it allows time for thinking and for questions. I also
using those good strategies, right?
Exactly. I was also pausing to see if any of my colleagues had any questions, because I don't want to dominate the question sessions. But something that I noticed at a school district that they did to support the English language learners is they actually communicated with families to basically mandate that the students that needed the extra support show up to the summer programs. But they did it in a way by, respecting the families, by letting the families know, hey, we noticed that your child is struggling, they could use some extra supports. Will you, encourage your child, and will you basically require your child to participate in either the summer learning or the after school that they supports that they had. So I'm trying to figure out a way how we can empower families. Because, if you had asked me when I was in, elementary school and junior high school, if I would voluntarily come to summer school, I would say, heck no, and that's putting it nicely. So I'm trying to figure out a way how we can, cajole, and entice, engage our students, right? Or convince them, right? With just, how can they see it in their best interest to say, hey, we know that it was a tough year. How can we re-engage you over the summer? So yes, we're going to ask you to sacrifice some of that fun summertime, but in a way that will hopefully encourage them. So how can we inspire our students to want to do this? And then also have the staff to want to do it, right? Our staff have been through a really tough year, especially our teaching staff. So a concern that I have is, will we have enough staff, teachers who are interested in doing some of these summer programs that we know our students are going to need?
Hey, Ricardo, I had some of those same thoughts, and but not to interrupt you, Jennifer, I apologize, but I forget stuff if I don't say it right away sometimes. But one of my curiosities was about that some of that incentivizing kids, and also kind of getting teachers excited, is to do things maybe in a little less conventional manner, and then that could mean having ELA stuff done through say a VPA format, with either visual and performing arts plays or those kinds of things, and then certainly math and those.
Did we lose him?
I think so.
He's stalled.
Give him a moment to see if he comes back.
Could be wait time. And just while he's unfreezing, Tammy can speak to, if Mr. Valencia would like, how we engage our parents in that. And then at the last board meeting, I think we showed our numbers for our migrant students are very high for participating in our programs. And if someone else wants to speak to summer programs, I'm fine with that, to share that information with them as well.
So when it comes to parent engagement, we're always looking to make parents our partners in the job of educating their child, because they bring an important perspective. And so if we are helping our parents to understand the importance of having their child enroll, and then we're also facilitating that, so removing some of those barriers to make sure that they do have access, whether that be with language support or enrollment support, we're seeking to find all of those different avenues to help our parents and our students see the value in summer learning, and also to access it.
I would also add that the NWEA assessment does provide a very helpful parent report. And I really see that tool is one that we can use to empower our parents, Mr. Valencia, as you were asking originally, because it gives them the information about where their student is, and it allows them to have that good conversation with their child at home. We also know that our teachers across the system have been using that data to help our students do goal setting. And what we find is that when we do goal setting with our students and they see their personal growth, and that is an outcome of the work and the effort that they're putting into their learning, they tend to be more motivated to continue on that trajectory, right? So using those resources to help empower both parents and students it'll be greatly to our benefit.
And Mr. Holland said we do have STEAM programs and lots of hands-on programs for our kids. I mean, not last summer, right? But we still did it virtually, but it's of course not quite the same in person. And then our migrant department that offers so many great expanded day and then weekend, lots of things with art. We do that for our English learners as well. But also remembering that our specialized targeted programs also come with a lot of requirements on what those programs have to look like in order for us to be able to continue getting the funding. I see now Rebecca starts nodding. There's really strict requirements around how much has to be in math and how much has to be in ELA. And I like to think the teacher in me comes out, I can make anything math, I can make anything reading, right? But they also are pretty savvy to that. We have to be very creative and how to ensure our kids have a creative experience so that summer's fun and they want to go, but yet we also have to show we have some really serious pre and post assessments that show that growth did occur in ELA and math in order to continue receiving funding. So there's a balance to that the teams do really work on, knowing that kids want to be engaged and enjoying their time and rather than being at home.
And our goal will be to take those good, solid programs and to package them in such a way that they are appealing, if you would, to the students, right? It will excite them. Our goal is to want them to come. Re-engagement is one of our goals, as I shared.
Mr. Valencia, I giggled when you said yours. I came from a district where folks had to opt out. So kids who were identified, they had to opt out. So it is a popular response, and it's something that we can talk about because I've seen that be fairly effective. So thank you for that. Just reminder that is a good strategy. Thank you. So how are we investing in all of this?
Yes.
Yes. So Rebecca, please. Miss Herrick.
Okay. I'm going to bring up my screen and move everyone over here. All right. Can you see my screen? Okay. All right. So thank you, Ms. Loftus. And we are going to talk now about, I want to say good evening and to the board members and superintendent. And I am excited to share with you about investments that we are making through the LCAP to address achievement gaps and educational inequities. So as you are aware, the LCAP investments increase and improve services to address identified needs of our students. Our LCAP team, including all stakeholders, continues to work within a cycle of continuous improvement as we review both quantitative and qualitative data, like the NWEA data Ms. Guak shared with us this evening. We look and we listen to understand our students' greatest needs, what performance gaps exist for our students or student groups, and set goals and priorities, and always to align these with our vision of student success. So we have been working on and will continue to work on plan alignment across the system in order to ensure there's a through line that will increase all students' outcomes and provide equity for all students. We have updated our goals and we have rewritten new LCAP goals in order to provide high quality teaching and learning district-wide. So following our examples are some of the investments we are making. So here are some examples of investments to support high quality instruction for all students and build capacity district-wide. We have tools that can be used to increase our practice of evaluation of programs and student achievement. For example, we have invested in NWEA, Panorama, and staff to support data analysis. Another investment is the new Teacher Academy. The purpose of the program is to support and retain all new teachers and to ensure the highest quality education for our students. Another investment is our instructional coaches. We have 21 coaches, and ongoing professional learning for certificated and classified staff. So next, we have investments to support access to grade level curriculum and expanded learning. We have a lot of expanded learning opportunities, several of them, which Ms. Loftus talked about this evening. We also are going to increase support of our multilingual program. We have bilingual instructional assistants for our primary grades. That's for our transitional kindergarten students, first and second grade classes. Our English learner instructional coaches, we are going to increase our investment, adding coaches to our junior high schools. We have the State Seal of Biliteracy Pathways program, and then direct to support to school sites through our program specialist and English learner teachers on special assignment.
And I'll put in a commercial here for the State Seal of Biliteracy Pathways program. It is really phenomenal. And if it's in the board's interest, I know we have another board session in July, but if you'd like to hear about it earlier than that, please let us know. It's really great. And then we also have a new multilingual parent handbook that's pretty phenomenal also. So if it's at the board's pleasure, if you want to hear about those prior to July, just let us know and we're happy to put it on a board agenda. Thank you, Rebecca.
Melissa, I'm letting you know right now.
I was just going to say, I want to.
We need an update for sure on the pathways.
Awesome.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry to interrupt you, Vita.
No worries.
All right, so here are examples of investments to support diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have professional learning, and this includes the collaboration time for that team. Course offerings to ensure junior high students have equal access to electives, and our preschool program that continues to grow. Multilingual, culturally relevant, and creativity workshops for all stakeholders. Interpretation training, and then data instruments. And we've talked about two of these, the Panorama and NWEA. So we have a lot of ways that we're collecting data. Here are some examples of investments to support access to grade level curriculum and expanded learning. So we have system-wide technology upgrades. We've done a lot of upgrades this year. Certificated and classified staff, including full-time computer technicians, and a district level team. And that team supports data analysis, professional learning, expanded learning, and parent and community engagement. We have ongoing investments for our Chromebook refresh program. And again, this is all of our students now. And then we have upgrades to continue to provide equal internet access to all of our students. So here are some examples of investments to support parents, families, and community members. So we have our site and district community liaisons. All of our sites have a community liaison. Then we have our district community liaisons. We have our family outreach advocates, translation and interpretation services, parent and engagement and education programs, and then increased communication services. And I thought our district website, the update, was a really good example of just one of the increases in communication of services. So every single example of our investments that I've mentioned aligned with our overarching objectives: high quality grade level instruction for all students, expanded equitable access to resources, increased technology, expanded parent engagement, effective support systems, and expanded learning. We have LCAP goals around all of these, and many of the investments align with the majority of the goals. So at this point, I wonder if you have any questions.
I just want to say I'm looking forward to the May flyer so I could really see everything coordinated and explained.
Okay.
I'm a visual learner. I just want to see it all out there.
We'll have a lot of pictures.
Well, pictures are okay. I just want, I'm that diagram, what comes next, how do you qualify, who gets summer school, who doesn't, you know, who's not going to qualify. Because I believe summer school is listed separate from all of the other pieces of the list that was given.
Yes, it is, Ms.
It's
Flores.
summer school, migrant, ACEs, summer camp, special ed, extended year, attending, teaching, you know, all those pieces.
And I'm excited to bring it to you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Valencia?
Yeah, Ms. Herrick, can you please elaborate a little bit? I think one of your slides talked about, could you go back a little bit so that we can see it?
Of course.
It was the one of the DEI investments.
Okay.
The diversity, equity, and
There we
inclusion.
go.
Yeah, can you elaborate a little bit on the multilingual, culturally relevant, and creative workshops for all stakeholders? Could you tell us a little bit more about those investments?
I think I'm going to ask Ms. Dutra to talk about those a little bit.
Thank you. It's funny, when you went through it, I started explaining it and then I looked down and I was on mute. And then by the time I realized it, you were on the next one, because I thought no one knows what that means. This is looking into next year of where we're going to put investments. What we know is we have at least 50 people that we're going to want to engage in some trainings and to help build their capacity. It could also mean that some recommendations get started next year. It could be some multilingual conferences. It could be multilingual conferences that our translators and interpreters are going to. Could be something that our DEI group is going to attend. Definitely the cultural relevant. It could be that we're sending folks to Gender Spectrum. It could be we're sending folks to Unbound Ed. Like an Unbound Ed training is so deeply phenomenal. I'm sure you know about it, but that's a great thing for teachers, and you don't have to be deeply invested in the DEI work to really go to a training to understand here's what inequities look like in our classrooms, right? And here's how you spot them, and here's how you address it, and here's how you have difficult conversations. So there's a variety of things that we want to be able to fund next year through this work. Otherwise, it's hard to get the work off the ground. And other things in there too. It's why there's the book. There is lots of research. So we're buying books and anything that folks want to have so that they feel really researched and feel like they have the resources that they need. And then we also wanted to be able to, as we make more recommendations, to be inclusive of a bigger community in this to move forward with learning. Excellent. So not quite sure what it looks like yet, because that's really the role of the group, but we want to make sure we've got money to support that.
And one thing that I would like to see, if possible, is in addition to the supporting the 50 or so folks that are involved with the DEI work, of like, how can we give access to this to our whole staff through ongoing, solid professional development, like all these topics that are included here, right. Looking at the research, looking at the best practices, and doing that, throughout the year, as opposed to starting with the only 50 folks and then eventually getting to that point, but seeing how we can already expose all of our staff to these concepts.
Okay. It's part of the plan, right? Like after we do the learning, then the recommendation is where we enter. And it would be our intention that something gets started next year for all staff. So thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you for the question.
Just a quick question or clarification as we move through the multilingual piece of this and the state bilingual certification. I know the dual immersion program has to play a really important big part in this, and I know it's somewhat off the ground, but it's not even mentioned throughout here. Is it understood? Or I mean, there's still growing grade levels that need to be embraced, and so I just wondered in the work if there is something that clarifies the state bilingual. I lost the word. Nothing's in front of me right now.
The pathways?
Yes, that clarifies the different languages or the intent of it, just so that it's in the mix here.
Well, Vita, if you remember, when you and I went to the state roadmap discussion, I think that really speaks to the cross-curricular stuff that's outside the DLI, and really making it the pathways something that's accessible in a broader sense to more kids that aren't maybe specifically in a DLI setting, because really that's what we want to try to encourage from the beginning on, and establish that pathway so that they can get to they're incentivized and prepared to do it at the high school level to ultimately get the state seal by literacy at the end.
By literacy, yeah.
Exactly correct. Thank you. Mr. Hahn said we'll be presenting with us at the next meeting. That was perfect answer. Thank you. Any other questions on this piece? So to end this presentation tonight, I just want to read a quote to you. To ensure that all students, regardless of background, have equal opportunities and outcomes in learning, system-wide transformation must occur that will create the chance for students on the margins of our educational system to become central to it and perform to their fullest potential. So we will continue to bring back work that is addressing our educational inequities until all of our students are performing to their fullest potential. And we thank you for being an active participants in our presentation tonight. And a huge thank you to the team, of course.
Yes, thank you to each of you who made presentations. They were visual, informative, probably a little bit too much information in some cases, but nevertheless, we're taking it in, and you know, if we hear it enough times, we will actually learn. At least that's the theory. Any other comments or questions from board members for this amazing amount of information tonight in our presentation that has now gone a little over 2 hours, which is fine. That's not no judgment in that. I'm just pointing it out.
If can I just make a comment, Mrs. Cordero?
Well, I don't know. Can I?
From the mountains, from the Mountain Standard Time Zone. I was reflecting back on the one of the first slides that Luke showed of all the different colored blocks with resources and mission, or action plan and vision and those things. And what I was struck by is we kind of thought about resources, or at least briefly talked about resources in the context of what Rebecca's presentation was. And we, I think with the resources and even traveling back down to incentives, if you look at the chart, we have to consider our staff as some of those resources. And because that does trickle back down into the incentives portion of it and really helps us achieve the things that we're trying to do. And so I appreciate the comprehensiveness of, I said nest, didn't I? Of all of this, and the inclusion of staff and trying to make these things happen, because it's important to have all those blocks in place. So I appreciate everything that's been said tonight, and that inclusion of those other resources.
Thank you.
I would concur with that. Thank you. Thank you to everyone for your dedication and commitment to the work that we are all engaged in to, bottom line, make our students productive citizens in the world we live in. So with that, I don't think I have to do anything formally other than acknowledge that you've done a great job, and we will move on to item 5.
Yeah, and
which is the action item.
And even though that's Mrs. Beltran is listed, I'm going to introduce that item, and it goes back to exactly the point you were just making, John. The through line that Melissa referred to in the beginning of that work, we need to think in terms of through lines. And when you mention LCAP, having been a superintendent in the first year of LCAP, when the rules were basically rolled out in January, and you had to have a plan by June, we've tended to focus just on one of those squares. And in that time frame, resources was really one. And I've often joked, even though he's not in the room in this physical space, Matt's on the screen. The year that I was named superintendent here, the first meeting I came to get introduced, there was a public hearing for LCAP, and I was really taken aback, hit by that image, because there were a line of folks coming to the dais advocating for after school programs or this or that. And it was basically those things got gavelled in because there was no real rules. It was the wild, wild west at that point. And that's been a lot of what public education, I mean, I can only speak for 35 years of it, but when we've been wagged by one of those squares in that construct that you were describing, John, we tend to lose sight of how all those pieces are interconnected. And it takes time, and it's hard leadership work to lay out the foundation for that work when everybody just wants to know what's going on, with everything at one time. And I'm just looking at this setting, 2.5 hours to give you a summary of probably 2,000 hours of work that's gone on with the team members on these teams and the connected teams. And, we try and make things simple, but there's complexity in this work, right? And that's why it's so challenging to see something really have a systemic effect, because it's hard to keep that focus and keep all of those that in perspective. And so I say that just as a lead into this piece, and I'm going to go back and share just a couple of slides from what I was sharing before, is it really a go on backwards to go forward to make connection to these job descriptions. So even though it's an HR function, this is really an ongoing continuation of the work that we've been engaged in that really is built around this same principle, right? That we're trying to build that systemness that comes through with the task. I still keep these things on this job flyer. I still have posted on the wall in my office. And there are some days where I feel like, we're just barely scratching the surface, right? Because things like COVID happen, right? But you see, and so this work has continued. We've still tried to keep focused on what are those elements we have to put in place, so when we come out of the fog that we've been in, that we're continuing. And Jennifer described it. It's how do we accelerate? Not how do we, we never stopped rolling. So now it's really about accelerating. And so this was a part of the slide that I shared back in 2019. And really to go back to that construct that you're describing, John, those sequences in implementing that systems change. That first year I was here, we really spent a lot of time talking about the why. And that is that really connected to that incentive element of that. If there's not purpose in what you're doing, and incentives can be described in a number of ways, if you're not connected to that, you don't get the full effect. And it's to your point, Linda, that you just mentioned, to help to prepare children to be successful citizens. Right? So that's something that extends beyond our reach as a K-8 system, right? And continuing that articulation, building out those pathways that you mentioned. Did you say, Vita, that we have till the next meeting to bring that information back? Right? Well, we've been working on that too. And again, it's those things that you can't just fire hose people with. You've got to build the foundational work. And so as we transitioned into that piece with the leadership team, that next year was really, how do we put teams together? And you just saw an example of teams that historically in the Santa Maria Bonita system haven't worked in the same stratosphere. We've got that work is beginning to be coordinated. But again, the ultimate purpose is that it has an impact at the classroom student level. And those ripples, it takes some strategy to get out to that level, because that's where that exists, is the kids at the top of our heap. And so when I brought this back in 2019, it was really with this idea. We spent a whole year working with that team on design. How do you design that work? And it was really built around this idea that when you think of an organizational structure of a complex system like ours, you know, student achievement occurs at the school. So we've got to make sure that what we're building as that foundation serves to support that work at schools in supporting those children to be successful citizens and for their futures, right? For wherever that line intersects with them when they're college career ready, and that whole concept hasn't normally been a K-8 element, but we are a big contributor to that in the lives of our kids. And so when you think about this, and I shared this probably the first day I met with the principals here, and this is still a work in progress, right? Because you're still hearing a lot of, well, this is top down. Well, the planning piece, yeah, you can't, there's not a town hall meeting to decide how you're going to effectively implement something across 21 sites and 17,000 kids and 40-some thousand adults that integrate with that, right? There's got to start with the seed that grows up to that level. And so the challenge is to flip that system and put the students at the pinnacle of all of our work, knowing that target's going to move. You know, what worked for me in 1966 in kindergarten is entirely different than the results that Lori was sharing a little while ago. Because I was just a few blocks from here in Janetta Grisso's class at Miller Elementary. I was proficient at eating paste, right? That's, and taking naps. That's not really, what we're having kids do now when we're showing those NWEA results, that's nationally normed. And those of us, I just think, Vita, you've been doing this with the young ones and how different that experience is for children now than it was however long ago when I was in kindergarten. And so this work design was really, and I presented this the summer of 2019 going into the 1920 year, was built around this idea because we see it over and over again. There's the only way to assure to get kids to that destination is really to focus on providing them with that robust content-driven element, because you can create a through line of a child when they graduate from high school if they're part of the 37% of students in the Santa Maria Valley that graduate A through G, right, that are UC CSU eligible. There's a through line, and it's not like you go slow and then ramp up. It's that consistency to get you there. And so this was that element that we put together that brought together this teaming concept and these reorganization of these roles. And so when I presented this, it wasn't an organizational chart, it's the work design. And as we continue, and now I'm going to talk a little bit about the job descriptions that are here, it's a continuation of that work, because there are 9 job descriptions that are new in this work over the last 2 years. They're not entirely new. It's really a reorientation of roles. And so what I want to say, of the 9, there's one that's a new job. It's the TOSA for ACES. And so I want to start with that one. We've got this opportunity through what Jennifer was describing about coordinating all that work, through all the supplemental opportunities that we have for our kids, to ensure that through line is maintained and that trajectory is maintained for our children all the way through. And so we've had some, we partner as the ACES grant, the ACES program really emphasizes with our community partners. And we have great community partners. We've got the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club that just do so much to support our community. They're our partners in ACES, the After School Education Safety Program. They're kids primarily. A lot of them are college kids. A lot of them are most of them go to Hancock. We've got some younger or some older young adults, but they're in, and it's that 3 hours a day. And so really to make that connection, we've tried to do a number of things over the time. We tried creating school liaisons and getting an individual teacher at a site to really be the connection to that. I have to make sure that there was some continuation in that extra 3 hours the kids were getting to the learning that was going on in classrooms. That's a challenge. Our folks are already putting in a lot of time, right? And so to take on that additional responsibility, we've had some success with that, but it's not really sustainable. And so credit to Rob Bergen, he reached out to the expanded learning division, which really now encompasses ACES. If you remember when that program started years ago, it was just ACES, and it's grown as well. And so we're trying to grow with it, and ran this concept by about having a specific individual that becomes that liaison, that connecting point to the core teaching and learning. And that's something that ACES authorized. We're able to utilize those resources for that particular role. And so we're going to try to build, and again, to build that systemness, some consistency, not identical, but just some consistency between application at sites. The rest of those roles are really and I shared with the board a kind of a diagram, a one-to-one comparison. It's just some reorienting of some of those functions. Two of them, and I'm losing track of years, in the 1920 year, we had two positions. We had a program specialist in the special education division that became vacant last year, that we held vacant the entirety of this year. We had another position in teaching and learning that we held vacant. And it was with this idea in mind, particularly going into this distance learning. We didn't know how long it was going to be. I wouldn't have bet on a year. I knew it was going to be more. I bet first day we were going to finish last year. I was hoping that we'd get back sooner. But we really wanted to maintain form so that we knew we were hitting that, the upswing on as we're getting back in. So so two of those, the redesign is really built around kind of repurposing what some of those vacancies were. The special education one in particular being augmented by a TOSA position to support a TOSA who's got some expertise in special education to support that communication and that networking as well. So we normally don't bring job descriptions en masse like this. We've done them historically through the LCAP. I was mentioning that LCAP before, and so it got approved in June. And what would happen is we'd get it approved, we'd fly a position, and I don't see the pictures on the screen, but Rebecca is an example. The first year I was here, we had approved that LCAP coordinator position in June when the LCAP got approved. And so we didn't get the position filled. I don't think she started until November. And that's true, those of you that sit in those LCAP stakeholder meetings, so many of those positions are hard to fill. And so really bringing these in earlier than we normally would so we can get this realignment in place for the first day of the 21-22 year so that we don't have a lag. Because what this team just shared with you tonight is just a glimpse of the work that's going on. The TOSAs that are working here in teaching and learning this year have just done some phenomenal work. Really just providing that support in this transition we've been in, and as we continue in this transition, are critical roles, and have built so much of the underpinnings of everything that's been described. So I want to give credit to and acknowledgement to everybody who's traversed this unprecedented journey we've been on. But it's incumbent upon me to make sure that we're keeping a forward thought on where we're going next, and lining up those elements to meet those requirements. So that's kind of my long-winded interview. If you got questions about the specifics of the job descriptions, Ms. Beltran is on the screen, and did the hard work on all that in fulfilling the job descriptions themselves.
So, Mr. Altaveros or Bijou, are these new job descriptions for personnel that are already on staff, and they're not to be flown, with the exception of the newly created one?
I'm going to take that one because this is the decision that I made. Because when you're superintendent, once in a while you get to make a decision, and then everybody gets to shoot arrows at you. That we do have folks that are engaged in a lot of this work. I'm a firm believer in when you've got a new position, you fly it to get the best person. As an example, you know, when Mr. Muller retired last year, we flew the assistant superintendent's position. Ms. Dutra applied for it, and of the applicants was the selection of that team. So, so I want to say that to folks that are within these teams right now. They're, you know, they know the work, and so my hope would be that they want to continue with that work. Number one, that they know the work well, and so we would fly those positions during the last half of this year so that we're making those transitions for the beginning of 21-22 in stride.
In reviewing all of the job descriptions, and I did go through them all pretty carefully and 2 or 3 times, I looked at job qualifications, years of experience, what the expectations for the job were, etc. And there are there's variation in the format, especially surrounding the job qualifications and how they're presented, but which didn't really strike me, other than the fact that for all of the program specialist positions, except I have it right here, the teacher development one, there was no master's or admin credential listed as a requirement for that, whereas all of the other program specialist positions had that requirement. Is that an error?
Ms.
Or
Cadero, that could be an error, and I will go back and put that in.
okay, but it is intended to be included in that.
It's an administrative position, yes, ma'am.
Okay. Well, if it's flown as it is, that it wouldn't require that, or you would have applicants who don't have those qualifications.
I apologize, missed that one, and I will make sure that it gets added in.
Mr. Valencia? Be sure, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, related to that topic, one of the things that also caught my attention about the job descriptions is that many of them, you know, require a master's degree. And one of the things that I was talking to Luke earlier about, as I was gaining clarification about this, is I know it's possible that, for example, the Santa Barbara County has an admin program. And I know because I was able to participate in that program to get my administrative credential, but it does not require a master's degree, that particular program. And one of my concerns is if we require a master's degree for these positions, that it might not open up the applicant pool that we would want to see. So I do want to see admin experience and an admin credential if it's an administrative position, but I would like the board to consider, and our staff as a whole, to consider the merits of actually not requiring a master's degree, because in many ways, unfortunately, master's degrees have become a gatekeeper for many people, especially because higher education has become so expensive. Whereas to do the admin program through Santa Barbara County that I completed, you know, that one is, you know, a couple of $1,000s, but it's much more reasonable than the, you know, the higher cost of a master's degree. So I definitely want to make sure that we have, you know, highly educated, you know, staff. However, I do wonder if it might be advantageous for us to eliminate the master's requirement, keep the bachelor's and the admin credential, but not require a master's degree.
Mr. Valencia, the language, and I would verify for all of them, but I believe the language talks about being at any combination equivalent to. And so there is other, it's the master's degree, 5 years of certificated teaching experience, 3 years increasingly responsible supervisory and or management,
or related experience in area of specialty. So we look for what's the best fit, but it's a combination equivalent to. And I understand what you're saying. One of my former principals that I worked with as an assistant principal for 5.5 years and who I considered a mentor, got everything in his administrative credential without a master's.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I'm advocating for that, right? So for example, even for some superintendent positions, if they require a PhD, for example, that's going to also limit our pool, right, of candidates. And I see something similar happening here, and I would hate for that to happen where we would miss out on a talented pool of applicants for the sake of requiring a master's degree. Whereas to become a teacher, you require your bachelor's degree as well as your teaching credential. And that's usually the stepping stone, right, into these, other admin roles. And so I would like for the board to consider that, is striking that requirement of the master's degree for the sake of opening up more applicants for these positions.
I think what Ms. Beltran was pointing out, though, before you get to the master's degree, the beginning of that sentence is any combination equivalent to, and then it lists master's degree, 5 years, blah, 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 increasingly responsible and or management or related experience in area of specialty. So
what I will do is make sure that that preface is in all of the job descriptions that are administrative, because I don't believe it's in the coordinator family and community engagement as I just looked at it, but I will make sure that that preface is included in immediately.
Okay. Yeah, I think that that does cover if you didn't have the master's, that you did have your years of experience and some experience in supervisory or management related area of specialty.
So just to clarify then for Ms. Beltran, so an applicant could apply for the position and not have their master's degree as long as they have that admin.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Excellent.
And I will make sure that it's on all of the administrative ones.
Great. Yeah, because I would hate for an applicant to look at that and then interpret that as a master's degree being a requirement, and then they don't apply for the position. The other thing that I wanted to bring up is I did not see in any of the qualifications language around being multilingual as a preference, and I'm wondering what the board thinks about that, because I do see our leaders that are multilingual as major assets, right, in our district, especially since so many of our families are Spanish speaking, Mixteco speaking, in addition to many other languages. But I didn't see any language in there around that being a desired qualification or a preferred qualification for a candidate to be either bilingual or multilingual. And I'm wondering what the board thinks about that as a desirable qualification.
Mr. Valencia, I think, and Mrs. Beltran, you can confirm this. I think we've talked about that with previous positions, about that being something on what Ricardo is referring to as a preferred, but I don't recall how you worded it, but it was definitely something that we have talked about before. So maybe that's a pretty straightforward one to do.
You can add that, sir.
Excellent. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Took the words right out of my mouth.
Sorry.
No, that's perfectly fine. Any other questions or comments? If not, I'm ready for a motion.
So the motion was we received information regarding the rehabilitation and instructional services, and that the motion to be approved.
It's tough to hear what's happening.
Supposed to read my mind. So in the motion, it would include that the information was received regarding the reorganization of the instructional services, and that the motion include the approval of the job descriptions as presented
With
and
the
as
correction.
modified.
Yes.
Yes, as modified with all of those little notes. Yes. Okay, don't ask me to repeat that. Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you. Mrs. Flores moved, Mr. Valencia seconded the motion to approve the job descriptions as amended. and
Thank you so
modified.
much.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have reached the point in our board meeting before we adjourn to closed session. Does anyone have any reports or anything they want to say?
I'll pass, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hollinshead? No? Mr. Valencia?
I just want to, thank all of our staff for the tremendous work that you all have been putting in. I'm really excited about, the many things that we're doing to improve the education of our children. And so I really want to thank all of you for the sacrifices, the long meetings, the hard work. And I'm confident that it will pay off for our students. I also want to acknowledge, what a tough time right now it is for especially our Asian American community members. As we all know, there was a lot of deaths that have taken place recently, hate crimes, a lot of violence that's, that we're now beginning to acknowledge more, in our Asian American community. And it's good to see that there's a spotlight on the issue because it's not an issue that gets addressed a lot. And so I just want to just acknowledge, that as a staff, we are committed to creating a diverse and an inclusive environment. And I think for me, it really highlights the importance of the work that we're doing with diversity, equity, and inclusion, because there are real life consequences when we allow our fellow human beings to live in ignorance, to live with stereotypes, to live with prejudice. And it's literally costing the lives, right, of our brothers and sisters. So I just want to just say thank you, because this work is really valuable. And I just want to acknowledge, right, the difficulties that our families, our community members are going through. And hopefully we can be a support system. I've even heard that for some of our Asian American students, especially at the higher levels, like the high school level, for example, some of them are actually in fear of returning back to school because of the recent violent events that have taken place against our Asian American brothers and sisters. So, these are some of the issues that we will continue to grapple with. And this is, to me, it just lends that much more urgency to our work. The other, on a separate note, one thing that I also wanted to mention is that I really appreciate how thorough all the information is. But I also want us to think about as a board and as a leadership team, how can we also manage the time of our meetings so that, because if I'm a community member and I'm like, wait a minute, are these folks going to be online for 5 hours? I'm gonna be like, there's no way I'm going to attend that meeting, right? So how can we figure out a way, right, how to balance, right, our work so that if we need to have longer meetings, right, we can have either a study session or, have 2 separate meetings. So I think that that's a really important conversation for us to have. Is I really want to strike the balance of thorough, but also making sure that it acknowledges and honors people's time, because many of our family members have work to get to the next day. And so I just want, and also our staff, right? You all yourselves, got work to do the next day. So I just wanted that to also be one of our conversations moving forward. Thank you.
Well, I will just make a comment regarding that. The meetings in the very recent past have gone considerably longer than normal, if you will. And in large part, it is because we are and have been dealing with, creating the path of how we're dealing with. So it's not always till 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, fortunately, but
that is something to keep in mind, and I think we all concur with that. So, Mr. Ontiveros?
I just have a couple of comments. I want to thank the entire team for not just the presentation, but all the work that goes in behind it, and all of our folks across the district. You know, this has been a year like no other, and you know, and I've said it again. You know, we have so many folks have just stepped right into the breach. I was talking to Kathy Crump in the kitchen, the production kitchen here the other day, and you know, we've had this stellar crew that's been in putting together those bag lunches every day since last March, and her grandchild went back to school in Orchid 2 weeks ago, and you know, that's so now she's got one other thing to balance, right? And that's really where we all are. And so you know, kudos to everyone for the work done, and you know, we will continue to figure this out, because the you know, this is not just something that's going to end and we're going to go back to normal. It's I think we're wearing these masks for the long haul. You know, I might, you know, I grew a beard last summer because I was wearing a mask every day. I might start doing it again, because you're looking pretty dapper there, Mr. Lara. And so I do, because I would feel remiss if I didn't give a little bit of a COVID update, because there is some good news. You know, we actually officially went below
into the red tier,
into the real red. 5.8 was the adjusted rate for Santa Barbara County yesterday. I mean, that's a huge turnaround. The new daily rate, the real rate, 6.7. So even though the dividing line between red and purple moved up to 10, we actually are at below the old red guideline, and we're headed in the right direction.
And what about for Santa Maria specifically?
You know, I didn't look, because I just got the email before I walked down here today, so I haven't looked, but I'll include that in the update. I've got some things that I'm going to send out tomorrow, because we also found out, I just pulled it up, the printer got released today. The county is going to do 3 more weeks of clinics, and much more intense. They're going to do a week in Lompoc, a week in Santa Maria, and a week in Santa Barbara, to really get the subgroup that we're in, the educator sector. We got a gift over the weekend. I got a call on, I think it was Friday night, that public health had this clinic at Hancock today. And they knew they were going to have some availability, and so they contacted Antonio and I from the high school district, and myself, and we did a rapid fire survey. I put a survey out Monday morning, and as soon as people started responding back, they hadn't had an appointment yet, we were able to connect between the 2 districts, about 105 people. So again, I want to thank the public health department and Hancock College actually hosted that, because this, you know, we still got a ways to go, but with this new release today, they will be doing, it said in here how many doses. It's a big commitment, more than what we've had in the past.
Wow. I heard it on the news.
Yeah, it was. They had a press conference today, and well, they said in the press conference, it doesn't say in the release, but I wanted to say it was, it's like 1,300 doses a week over each of those 3 weeks, and we've done 3,300 entirely across the county, and so then they're going to do it, concentrate on each of the areas, and so I got that information will be coming out tomorrow. I'll include it in the board update this week, and I just want to echo Mr. Valencia, your comments. You know, but it seems like we've got a flag flying at half staff everywhere lately. You know, these unconscionable crimes that just are committed over and over again. You know, it is, you know, when we talk about coming back into this in-person learning, we've really put an emphasis on that social emotional learning component to really make sure that we are, you know, doing a check-in. And so to just be able to get some orientation through the last part of this year and rebuild that community, because I agree, I'm you know, hesitant to turn the news on every night, because it just seems like there's just so much that's happening. And so I appreciate your comments. And in fact, I would ask that maybe as we adjourn to closed session, we adjourn in remembrance of those folks who have lost their lives to violence over the last few weeks. That that America is a much greater country than this to allow this to continue to happen. So, if I can make that request.
It's a good request. Yes, thank you. And on that note, we will adjourn for 6 minutes and return to closed session at 9 o'clock.